I think one thing that all of us can really appreciate when it comes to one of these retro emulation handhelds is one that knows exactly what it's trying to be. One that's not full of a bunch of bloatware and ROMs that it can't run, and it just works. I think the evidence of this is obvious. If you look at the most popular retro emulation handhelds in this space, they're not the most powerful out there, but they all are really good at what they do. Today I finally got my hands on the Anbernic RG35XXSP. Anbernic has been on a roll with this RG35 line. Every iteration seems to be getting better and better, and I have really high hopes for this one. But will that upward trend continue, and how well does this thing actually perform? Let's find out. Inside the box, you have the 35XXSP itself, an optional screen protector, a USB Type-C cable for charging and data transfer, and a basic set of instructions. As if I needed to state the obvious, this thing is heavily modeled after the Game Boy Advance SP. It's got 4 face buttons, a directional pad, a start and select button, and this menu button. Over on the bottom, you have the 3.5mm headphone jack and 2 micro SD card slots, one for loading the base operating system, and the other to provide some additional storage in games. Over on the one side, you have the power button and a reset button. On the other side is where you control the handheld's volume. Top side, you have 4 shoulder buttons, a USB Type-C port, and HDMI output. Under the hood, it's very similar to the other members of the RG35XX family. You're not getting a ton of power, it's far from the most powerful handheld out there, but all of these offer a very solid price to performance ratio. It offers emulation all the way up to PSP, but once you get up to Dreamcast, performance is going to vary depending on how resource demanding the game is. As I previously stated, this thing is remarkably similar to the Game Boy Advance SP. Here they are side by side, and as you can see, the 35XX SP has a little bit more size to it. This larger size actually makes it more comfortable to hold for extended periods than the Game Boy Advance SP was. The face buttons and D-pad feel of excellent build quality, very tactile and clicky. Same goes for the shoulder buttons. Powering it up, we're greeted to that familiar Anbernic user interface, very clean and organized. I'm very much a fan. It comes in a variety of different colors and a few different setups. The one I got is the silver 64GB with the additional 128GB micro SD card. Guys, I can't say enough good things about this design. The convenience of the clamshell and the just large enough display make this thing the most pocketable handheld since the OG Miyoo Mini. But let's see how it actually plays some games. Now, while it is entirely possible to play and enjoy N64 games without the use of a joystick, this is a perfect opportunity to demonstrate the convenience of the clamshell design. That, coupled with plugging in a GameHead directly into the OTG port, make this handheld a tabletop powerhouse. Now, performance-wise, any of the N64 games that I loaded onto here all ran pretty good. But I will point out that if you are going to play in handheld mode, there are going to be some tweaks that are going to need to be done to the controls. Switching over to Dreamcast, I was actually pleasantly surprised with the performance. Whatever changes they made to the emulation or settings, everything seems to be a little bit more polished and refined than what the XXH was. And that already ran it pretty well. If I'm being quite honest, something like this would not be my go-to for Sega Dreamcast emulation, but it's nice to have the ability to dabble in that. PSP performance is very hit or miss. While some of the less resource demanding games are going to run relatively well, some of the others you're going to experience graphical hiccups and some massive dips in the frame rate. Once again, it's nice to be able to dabble in these things, but if you're specifically on the market for a retro emulation handheld for the purpose of PSP emulation, you might want to look somewhere else. Now, the real meat and potatoes of the XXSP, and we all know this just by looking at it, is its ability to play retro handheld game consoles. And it does not disappoint in this department. For example, while playing Game Boy Advance, you have the option to use a variety of different filters and cosmetic settings that you can really make the game look as close to it does on the original hardware. You combine that with this really kick-ass bezel, and you're gonna have a nostalgic overload. If that's not your thing, you can get rid of all that flair and still enjoy these games on this gorgeous 3.5-inch display. Going further back, it offers those same cosmetic options for Game Boy Color and original Game Boy games as well. This thing was tailor-made to give you the best experience possible while playing these old school handhelds. This is without question its greatest strength, and this alone is more than enough reason to go run out and get one of these. One thing I feel Anbernic really has on lock is its PS1 performance. Every time I review one of these Anbernic handhelds, it's some of the best PS1 emulation I've experienced, specifically with this RG35 product line, and it's no different here with the XXSP. It's got a solid library of PS1 games, and it's some of the best performance for the price. And if all that wasn't enough, you still have a massive collection of 8-bit, 16-bit, and classic arcade titles. When it comes to these sub $100 retro emulation budget handhelds, there's no perfect one out there. There's always going to be some give and take. But I have to say right now, as of the making of this video, this one makes a strong argument for being the best one out there and is my current absolute favorite. This is the one, guys. It knows exactly what it's trying to be, and although it dabbles in a few of the more higher end emulators, that's not the focal point. In my honest opinion, the RG35XXSP is the new budget king of these retro emulation devices. The only argument that someone can possibly make is that they should have included an analog nub somewhere, so that some games that require it for N64 or Dreamcast can be enjoyed without massive tweaks to the button configurations. But even then, that's such a minor nitpick and doesn't take away from how awesome this handheld is, even in the slightest. If you guys are interested in the RG35XXSP, I'll have links in the description below. Until next time, this is Ness, signing out.